Hello, everyone. Unlike these guys, this is my first time on stage today. I feel like you've been basically living up here. So I'm very, very happy that you were able to join me on stage today. So today we're going to talk about the travel rule. So first, a little bit of background about what we built. We are the leading travel rule service provider. Today, we are, we founded the company to build essentially Swift for crypto because we believed crypto needed a payment, messaging, and authorization system to be able to take off. And that's basically what we've been doing, and we've been using this to solve the travel rule because the travel rule is essentially a payment compliance requirement. And that's really actually where some of the problems with the travel rule also comes in, because most of crypto is not about payments today. But before we get into the conversation, I'll also say we're trying to fix this by actually working on much better payment infrastructure for crypto, because now there is a lot of payments happening on crypto, using stablecoins today, which I think everyone's excited by. And now travel rule actually provides real business value, where I think one of the big complaints in the past is that travel rule did not really provide a lot of business value. And maybe Peter might have some ideas that maybe it doesn't even provide enough value from a AML CFT point of view. So that's maybe where we could have a good conversation today. Do we need the travel rule?
Well, that depends. If you look at the consequence of the travel rule, of course it creates jobs. It leads to the creation of great companies like Notabene, so surely we've done something good. But full disclosure, I've had many things to do with many pieces of EU digital finance regulation. I had nothing to do with the travel rule. So I don't know why I'm...
So it's not your fault?
Well, I did spend for my sins a few meetings at the FATF where they were discussing the travel rule, and I sort of said, back, I can't remember when it was, a long time ago, and at a certain moment they were going to extend recommendation 16, which deals with wire transfers, to crypto transfers. And I said, this is a bit odd, because a wire transfer has nothing in common with a crypto transfer. So why are you applying a rule for wire transfers onto crypto transfers? Anyway, that's what the US wanted at the time, that's what the US got. So we have the FATF travel rule, which of course the US duly ignores itself, doesn't implement, but they just introduced this rule to encourage the others to comply with it. And then Europe, being very loyal to international standards, then turns it into legislation. Legislation leads to compliance and compliance burdens. But the question really is, what was the problem we were trying to achieve? Or we're trying to resolve? So not a problem the problem we were trying to resolve. And originally the problem was to avoid abuse of the financial system. We need to have transparency, we need to have an exchange of information between the sender of value and the receiver of value so that the system could not be abused. Fine. That's a great objective to be had, and I do think that crypto companies should realize that in this world where they believe that libertarian principles of anonymity and privacy and so on that they apply, is that there is no fundamental right to anonymity, and if you're going to transfer value, you are going to have to identify yourself. But the purpose of the travel rule was to avoid that bad people abuse crypto for bad things. And the question is, now that we have the travel rule, are we achieving that? Have we stopped bad people from using crypto for bad stuff? And it is my impression, but it's just an impression, that we haven't achieved that. What we have achieved is that bad people are now going under the radar. They're no longer using regulated intermediaries that have to comply with the travel rule, but they go into the unhosted service provision. So the people who end up complying with the travel rule are people who have nothing to hide, Now, that doesn't mean that companies shouldn't exchange information, but why did it require regulation? If you are a serious company and you're facilitating the transfer of value, surely you want to know who you're dealing with. Surely you have an interest. Even the regulator shouldn't tell you, you should check who your customers are, and you should check where you're sending the money to. And if you are an intermediary receiving value or assets for one of your customers, surely you want to know, where is this stuff coming from? The problem is that the industry wasn't doing that, and therefore the regulators told them that they had to do this. And a solution imposed by the regulators is always suboptimal. And that's it, diplomatically put.
And I think on that front, Oliver, you guys have been working with our team for a while now, and congratulations on your license
Thank you.
The other day, which is exciting. Like, where have the struggles been for you guys?
I mean, it starts everything with what Peter just elaborated on, you know. I mean, this thing tries to solve something which we could also have solved with other things. You know, we have so many other things in place already to have bad actors to be kicked out, to find out if they're here. I mean, all these kind of transaction monitoring stuff and KYC and whatnot, you know. So most probably it would not have been necessary to have also this rule for crypto, because as Peter rightfully said, and I hope I get it right, but wiring money is completely different to transferring crypto on-chain, you know. I mean, we have all these things in place. What it does now is to stop completely the pseudonymic value of crypto transfers, which is from a compliance perspective more or less okay. However, coming to your question, there are still a lot of practical issues in the daily business, and this is why it's good to have you guys, but also you guys, as we know, face these issues because there's no international standard. You know, crypto by nature is international, is cross-border, and as long as there are actors in place not using the same standards, we will always fail. Even if we want to comply with the laws and with the travel rule and whatnot, and using you guys, we will still fail if the CASP, where we send the funds or receive the funds, is not complying with these rules or did not implement the technology with you guys or with anybody else. Yeah, so that's a huge issue, but there are several more we can talk about later.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty. I mean, we help companies through these every day. But I mean, one thing I'd like to actually challenge is, like, Peter, you say that a crypto transfer is not the same as a wire transfer. I know the implementation of it is completely different, but the job that it solves is surely the same.
Yes, the economic function is the same. It's a transfer of value, but a wire transfer, the way a wire transfer is executed is you have a communication between two parties and then a clearing of the assets in the background. A crypto transfer is you transfer the value and you have no communication between it. So a wire transfer starts from the beginning that you have two entities at both ends that are communicating with each other and that they have plenty of opportunities to exchange all kinds of information about whom they're saying, you are going to receive X amount of whatever from so-and-so for the following purposes. And then the recipient says, oh, I'm getting so much money from so-and-so addressed to so-and-so. So these people are communicating. Now we have this distributed ledger system where everyone can communicate with everyone, but the communication protocol, the messaging protocol, wasn't there. So what the travel rule is doing, it is basically requiring the industry to build an extra layer on top of the system just to communicate identification data. It strikes me as a bit sort of complex. Now, again, this creates opportunities for companies that know how to solve problems so that companies with real worries can focus on their real business and can pass on the problems of complying with this to you guys, so everyone's happy. But it's a bit of a complicated way of achieving the other result. And what they didn't do at the beginning is saying, what really is the size of the problem? How big is the problem of these anonymous transfers of illicit activity on blockchains? And what is the cost of the solution? And if we currently see is that if we look at the numbers of illicit activity, and any illicit activity is an activity too much, but in absolute terms, the cost of the illicit activity is far less than the cost of complying for everyone with these rules. So that's bad economics.
Couldn't agree more.
This is also where I think the problem is when FATF came out with the rule is that they looked at, like we used to call this the Bob to Alice fallacy, is that the rules are really written as if it's a payment, but most transactions to this day are not payments, they are transfers, and they are literally crypto transfers. And there are many different ways that can also be optimized through messaging to be able to avoid fraud and all of these aspects of it. But I think the core thing that we're trying to do is actually to bring some business value to it, because one of the reasons the travel rule was not that big a problem in wire transfers, for example, is there's no need for a travel rule service provider there. You don't, I mean, really my goal is to eliminate the need for a travel rule service provider here by providing other kinds of services to the industry on that as well. But you need to provide that business value. If you can do that, then it's not that big of an issue to comply. And I do think messaging is a very, very important part if we really want stablecoin transfers, also crypto transfers, to actually turn into payments. And that's one of the big differences between a blockchain transfer and a payment, is that you do need information, to travel along. I hate the term travel rule personally, but you need a payment message for people to identify each other as part of the system. Crypto never needed it because of the trading use cases, but for payments you do need it.
I mean, we could have limited it to payment solutions, I mean, I'm an absolute believer that EMTs are going to be the future of payment as well. So, and in that case, for sure, it should be easy also to have the travel rule in place for this kind of usage. For the transfer or for the trading, it's useless at the end of the day.
But also to your point, now that it is law and therefore people have to comply with it, whether it's a good idea or not doesn't really matter, it's the law, so you're stuck with it. And companies have to invest in this. It would be such a pity that they just invest in complying with the actual rules and the data fields. If you are required to exchange information, why don't you just then also build in some more useful information that is important for both parts of the transaction to know about? Of course, that's going to raise questions about privacy and can you exchange this information and so on. But if you look at a travel rule solely from the perspective of compliance, it's always a lost. It's bad business. But if you say, well, look, we have to do this, why don't we build something useful around this that otherwise companies that are in this space will want to do anyway, because you want to have an idea about the liabilities you're taking on, the risks you're taking on by receiving these funds. I do not believe for a second that a serious company, and you don't even need a compliance department for this, but a serious company that's properly governed would want to intermediate value transfers without having any idea where this money is coming from or where this money is going to. I just don't think if that's your business model as a company, you're going to be in trouble pretty soon. Not because of an enforcement case, but you're running a bad business.
Yeah, and I think this also really goes down to the point that the travel rule, like one of the foundational flaws of the travel rule was that FATF didn't actually call out the purpose for it directly. And I've been at many meetings with FATF and I've asked for this. Can you just spell it out, please? Yes. This is what people are complaining about. And that's where a lot of people think the travel rule is about transferring PII. But they were being very prescriptive, but that's not what it's about, right?
Yeah, but maybe that should be shouted out loud also on panels like this or even in articles, because nobody knows that. You know, everyone is afraid nowadays of this because of BII data, but also we have not only this travel rule thing, we also have this DAC 8 coming now for tax purposes and so on, and people are super scared about that. I mean, anyhow, we have only 12% adoption all over Europe, more or less, so it's not a lot. And having these ideas of the people that we just frequently transfer data of them, doesn't matter if it's BII or tax or any other information, that will stop them from trading on our platforms, even if they would like to, and even if they should know that the same is true already in traditional markets and finance and banks. Since years, nobody's complaining about that anymore, you know. At least as long as there's some cash available in Europe. But if they would realize that this is just a system applied to this new industry, more or less, crypto, then they should not fear so much about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Blockchains are public, and that's one thing I hope everyone knows. I'm sure everyone here knows that every transaction is public on a blockchain here. Most people do not understand this either. And you need a private context layer to be able to talk about what is this transaction about, whether it's trading use cases as well, whether it's payment, all of these parts. Also to be able, from a context, to comply with all of these other rules, like tax rules, you need additional context to be able to do that. And that's where when we looked at the travel, we saw, well, this is a requirement for, number one, a context layer, and a messaging and authorization layer. And that provides a lot of value to businesses. But if you look at, this is a way to exchange PII, and here's a very explicit list of the PII that you need to explain, that does not really make sense.
Absolutely.
But to your question, what was really the purpose? The purpose at the FATF was to address money laundering and terrorist financing, because the assumption or presumption was that all of this crypto activity was one big money laundering and terrorist financing conspiracy. And this needed to be stopped. And it's still a popular belief among money regulators that the main use for crypto is illicit finance. I try my best to satisfy, look, if you are a criminal or if you're a terrorist and you're half smart, stay away from a blockchain.
Yes.
Stay away from a blockchain. You're going to get caught. Bad idea.
This is what I always say. The only ones really are able to doing so in freedom are the guys from Lazarus, because they are protected by their government. Otherwise, you should refrain from doing so. And there is every year this, I guess it's Chainalysis who sends out this report, and I guess the last figure I have in mind was some kind of 2% of all the transactions in the world are illicit funds. So it's really not about, and this is also what the regulatory bodies nowadays recognize. So it's about serious business. And this 2% we could also have tackled with other technologies. However, now that we have it, as Peter already said, we need to comply with these laws. We are happy to use you guys, but what we now need to focus on is to agree, so all of the competitors and market participants need to agree on one global standard how to interact together and exchange this data, so that we're not getting in trouble, me as a managing director personally, if these guys do not comply or we do not comply.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that. And FATF has been calling this out as well ever since we started meeting with them 5 years ago. So we've published a fully open public domain standard for this that everyone can use. They don't have to reach out to us or anything at all. And it's something that we really hope people do. And FATF said, can you please go do this? Because none of the exchange-led ones want to interoperate.
I'm gonna invite you and Peter and all the partners from the other players in the market to Vienna. We're gonna have a huge Vienna Congress, and we're gonna agree on an international market standard for travel rule, and then we will solve a lot of problems there, hopefully.
Travel rule and schnitzel?
Yes. And a nice ball.
I'll join for the schnitzel, but not for the discussion of the travel rule.
Okay, it's fine.
So Peter, if you were to start from scratch to actually, without looking at existing rules, existing systems, what would you have built instead of the travel rule?
Well, I would start with a question, what's the problem? What are we trying to achieve here? How does this technology work, and what's the best way to achieve the solution to the problem? What we did, and we often see this in policy, and I've been at the European Commission for close to 30 years now, is that normally in policy making you start with a problem, you analyze it, and then your policy is a solution. That's the way it's supposed to be. What often happens is you
start... Has that happened?
Yeah, no. What usually it happens, unfortunately, is that you start with a solution and you end up with a problem. We should do it the other way around.
I mean, that's the same with most technologists, like we're definitely like that as well. So.
I think these are famous final words. No, I have nothing to add here.
So we were planning this to have a lot of arguments. I mean, we've had some disagreement, but unfortunately, less punches thrown here on stage than we had planned.
But we should keep the travel rule, because if we don't keep the travel rule, you're going to go out of business, and we don't want that, do we?
We will find other things to do, he said.
I mean, we're trying to be known as not a travel rule. I think crypto, stablecoins, payments needs an order of magnitude better payment network, and that is what the travel rule is, kind of a way of taking the fantastic work that everyone's been doing on settlement and the stablecoins to build that. Yeah. And that's what we're focused on.
Very good.
Cool.
Thank you.
I guess time was...
We are over.
So, do we have time for questions? I don't know.
Is there questions?
Is there questions?
Because if there are questions, we're not gonna... we're gonna give you time to ask your questions. But there is no question. So a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
They were so clear, so on point that there is no question left to be answered. Thank you so much again. Thank you. Thank you so much.